we go. Good afternoon. It is Saturday, October 16th, 2021. On the Gregorian calendar, by my reckoning, on God's biblical calendar, Yahuwah's calendar, it is the 7th month and the 25th day. Of that I'm comfortable to say. And I'm going to say year 5946, and I admit that that's probably an approximation, but in that neighborhood. And that's since creation. And that's where we're going to start today, is in the beginning. So I'm going to blow the shofar, and then we'll get started with the Shema. So hold on to your ears and your dogs. And I'm no Josh Boyd. Hallelujah. That's what I got. Okay, thank you. And thank you to the dogs for sharing. I'm going to share the screen here in a second. And
hey, no. Thank you.
All right. Philip, if you'd let me know when you can see the Shema, I'll see if everybody can.
I can see it.
Okay, great. Well, join me if you will. Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malkuto, Leolam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah is our God, Yahuwah is one. Blessed is the name of his glorious kingdom for all eternity. And you shall love Yahuwah your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These words which I am commanding you today are to be on your heart. You are to teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. They are to be as frontlets between your eyes. And write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Amen.
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 All right. So this is the reading that I sent out. I hope that you read it all, because it's all important. Every word in there is, every letter in there. And in fact, we're going to show you how just important 2 letters might be today. Okay, I will admit we're going to spend probably Genesis and Jubilees is where we're going to dwell today. So this is the outline. We'll talk about some of this in more detail, but I do, as part of the 4-portion cycle, like to make sure that we follow the big story. So I'm going to cover the big story, the plot line, if you will. And it doesn't take long for the plot to thicken here in the first 6 chapters of Genesis, Bereshit. We'll talk about creation, the 7th day Sabbath, the Shabbat. We'll talk about the garden east of Eden. We actually will talk about the creation of woman, and we're going to call the man Adam and the woman Eve, just because we can. They're not necessarily biblical names, but they are understandable. You know who I'm talking about. And we're going to talk about Cain and Abel, mostly Cain. Touch very briefly at the end on genealogies and kind of a foreshadowing of next week, and then a little bit about the proof letter. So I am going to use Jubilees. Different people have different opinions of that, and I accept that and respect that. I am going to present it as at least a historical document to use. You need to study it yourself or throw it out the window, whatever is your preference. But I will be using it today and in future teachings. To me, it provides a second witness to a lot of the things that we find. The teaching outline for today, I'm sorry I didn't make a slide, I thought I had. Right, we're going to go through the storyline first. I'm going to talk about briefly the first Messianic prophecy. I've said many times, if you don't see Yahusha, our Messiah, on every page of the Bible, go back and read it again. You missed it. We'll talk about the garden, what we call the Garden of Eden. It's really a garden east of Eden, in the east. We're going to talk about, I said Cain primarily, am I my brother's keeper, one of the most famous, or I would say infamous lines in the entire Bible. Talk a little bit about the pre-flood world, and also not on the outline, but coming from Jubilees, the 22 acts of creations. Okay, the Bible begins with the creation account, and we're going to come back to that in a bit, but let's talk through what all happens in the reading from Genesis first. Please don't get confused by the first two chapters. Many commentators have come up with many interpretations and schemas to explain what's going on. We're going to put Genesis alongside Jubilees as a first and second witness to the creation account in an effort to clarify questions and thoughts. I hope that's helpful. As an example of what I mean by repetition leading to possible confusion is found in these two verses. Genesis 1, verse 27, God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And in verse 31, so God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. So there was evening, there was morning, the sixth day. And then we're going to compare that to a little later, starting in chapter 2, the first 3 verses. So the heavens and the earth were completed, along with their entire array. God completed on the seventh day his work that he had made, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his work that he had made. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, for on it he ceased from all his work that God created for the purpose of bearing. And then a few verses later in chapter 2, then Adonai Elohim formed the man out of the dust from the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils a breath of life. So the man became a living being. Then Adonai Elohim planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Some try to read these first 2 chapters of Genesis as a strict chronological timeline. I don't think that is accurate. Several things to note. In verses 27 and 31 of chapter 1, Yahuwah created man on the 6th day. And in chapter 2, verse 3, Yahuwah set apart the Sabbath, the 7th day. In 7, Yahuwah formed man out of the dust of the earth. So we know that happened on day 6. So you can see this is not a chronological timeline. We went from creating man to the 7th day, back to the 6th day. So when was woman formed? And again, we'll call her Eve for the sake of. Was it in verse 27? God created him male and female. He created them. The short answer is no, and we'll have to wait for a second witness to establish that matter. So hang with me, if you will. Again, don't overthink this. Understand that creation took place over 6 days, 6 24-hour days, and Moses confirmed this for us. We look forward a little bit to Exodus 20, verse 11. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Thus Adonai blessed Yom Shabbat and made it holy. The word used consistently throughout Genesis and shown here for day is Yom. How long is the Sabbath?
24 hours.
It's 24 hours. Is it an indefinite period of time? Wow. A geological day lasting a millennia, or as we've said, a 24-hour period lasting from, in my opinion, sunrise to sunrise. And again, that's a 24-hour period, whenever you think it starts. So this one verse establishes both a 6-day creation and the creation account being 24-hour days. So because he refers to that 7th day as Shabbat, the Sabbath that we know is 24 hours long. Okay, back to the plot line. So far, Yahuwah has created, culminating with creating man, and then put the man, let's call him Adam, as I said, in the garden in Eden in the east. Adam was not created in the garden. He was created and then placed in the garden. So make sure you follow that. I'm going to take a short pause here in the form of a mini Hebrew lesson, as I sometimes do, to lay a foundation for a discussion we may have at some point in the future. So this is just to keep you coming back. So here is Genesis 2:8. Then Adonai Elohim planted a garden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. The word translated garden is shown here. Who wants to spell that for me?
Gan, Gimel,
Gimel,
and an N, a noon.
Nun Sofit. How would you pronounce that? Gan. Is that what you said?
Gan.
Okay, Gan. That's the pronunciation. And what does it mean?
Gan,
What about that little dot?
it means garden. That little dot did not exist in the original Hebrew.
Right, but it exists now. What does it mean now?
I don't know, I don't study that.
Okay,
Why don't, maybe you can teach
I
us.
imagine it's a pronunciation.
it's just a vowel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a vowel marker.
So it's a vowel marker.
Well, actually, the little line underneath is an sound, A. See that straight line?
So the dot just indicates that there would be a vowel in there,
Right.
not
Yeah.
what the vowel sound is, right?
The markers themselves will tell you what the vowel
Vowel
sound
sound
is.
is.
Okay.
Trust me, I'm not
But
a student
in
of
ancient
that.
Hebrew, there was none of
Not
that.
either.
Like Jeff said, there were no vowel markers in the ancient
Yeah.
Hebrew. But with proper testing, I think the vowel markers are okay. You just have to you have to understand what the words say without the vowel markers before you can properly render them with the vowel markers.
Right.
That's my opinion. And I'm not a student of the vowel markers, but I'll try. Okay, so Gimel Nun Sofit we talked about. And it's began. And this is what it means. It means an enclosed or a fenced garden. So remember this, the garden in Eden in the east is an enclosed garden. Okay, just file that away. We'll come back to it shortly, and then maybe longly as well. Okay, so keeping the storyline going, then in Genesis 2, starting at verse 15, then Adonai Elohim took the man and gave him rest in the garden in order to cultivate and watch over it. Then Adonai Elohim commanded the man, saying, from all the trees of the garden you are most welcome to eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you must not eat, for when you eat from it, you most assuredly will die. Then Adonai Elohim said, it is not good for the man to be alone. Let me make a well-matched helper for him.
So hold up a minute. Who did he tell that to, Hank, right there?
Where?
Who is Yahuwah God speaking
Start
to?
16, start at 16.
And all the way down to 18.
No,
You can just read 16. Then,
16 and 17.
Adam, sons of Adam.
Oh.
Okay.
Where's Eve?
Where's Eve?
Look at verse 18 for a hint.
Yeah, she hasn't been made yet.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. She's not there yet.
So, there's just something you don't always come across.
Mhm.
Is he told that to Adam.
Just to Adam.
Just
to
Adam,
Adam,
right.
the man. Okay, so
Everything goes back to this.
Yeah.
Everything goes back to this.
And yet he pointed his finger real quick at Eve. Well, she pointed her finger too, but it's just, I thought that was like, wow.
Didn't take
Aren't
long,
we
did it?
all just like that,
Well, I'll make a comment a little later on, but the preview is that 6 chapters in, and let's call the whole thing off.
Man, I'm telling you, it blew up. And
Not
blew
even
up
6
fast.
chapters in. Okay, so Yahuwah gave Adam some instructions. He said, cultivate and watch over the garden. He had a job. He's given the job of naming the animals too. It's not in this particular passage. And he said, eat, but, and then he said, oh, by the way, you need a companion. So this is what's going on here. A quick recap. I said earlier, the woman, let's call her Eve, was not formed on day 6, and now we see that. But was she created on day 6? I'm going to ask Chip this question. When was what was to become you created. You understand the thing about eggs being fertilized and all that, boys, the birds and the bees kind of thing? I don't want to get too biological here. Okay, well, it's a biological fact that a female is born with all of the eggs that they will ever have. So when did what was to become you, form?
Isn't that crazy?
When? I can't hear you.
In the beginning of time.
Not for you. Okay, you came out of mommy's tummy. When did that egg that was to become you form in your mommy's tummy?
Oh, he was.
No, when she was in her mother's womb. So you were in your grandmother's womb. That's when you were created.
Not Hank, just you.
Well, Hank too. I'm sorry. You were both.
Hank was in there too.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
Okay. So when was Eve? I want to keep my words straight here because I created.
When Adam was created.
When Adam was created.
Because
What does she come from? Not an egg in his ovary.
Oh,
It's a rib.
She came from
She was created then, but she wasn't formed until after this point. We're gonna find out just how much older Adam was than Eve.
Oh, okay. This makes me think of the little Russian dolls.
Nesting.
Yes, exactly. That's good. I should have had that as a little artifact. So remember that. You were in Granny Dolly's
Bobby.
body. So Whitney and Kendall were there they had a very close bond with their mother's mother, with Oma, and obviously with their mother. But they were there in their grandmother's womb. They weren't born until many years after that. So anyway,
That's amazing.
just something to know. So this is part, you get the confusion. Well, they say he was formed, that Adam and Eve created man and the woman back there in the beginning, day 6. But we're going to see she's not there yet. And he's already in the garden planting and eating and cultivating and naming and all that. And Eve's not there. So you got to reconcile that somehow. And that's my explanation.
And they were created, male and female.
Oh, now you're getting controversial. I saw something. Well, I won't digress because I'm on the record here. I'm being recorded, and I'll share it later. Yes, they were created male and female. It even says that in the Bible. And like I say, we're not going to read every verse of the passage. We've got enough we're going to cover. I'm just trying to hit some highlights, but it's in there. I'm glad you did the reading. Thank you. You said you didn't remember what you read, but you did. Okay, so in chapter 3, we read about the serpent. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I want to point out one verse 15. In chapter 3, I will put animosity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head and you will crush his heel. Many consider this to be the first prophecy of a coming Messiah. I've shared this before, but I believe the first Messianic prophecy actually comes a little earlier in chapter 1. Starting at verse 11. Then God said, let the land sprout grass, green plants yielding seed, fruit trees making fruit, each according to its species, with a seed in it upon the land. And it happened so. The land brought forth grass, green plants yielding seed, each according to its species, and trees making fruit with the seed in it, each according to its species. And God saw that it was good. So there was evening, there was morning, the third day. On the third day, that which was dead sprouted forth as new life. In that rebirth, the resurrection from the dead, lies our blessed hope. So I think that's the first Messianic prophecy. I'm not dogmatic about it. Either way, it happened early on, the first Messianic
I'm
prophecy.
sorry, which verse is that?
Chapter 1, verses 11 through 13. The seed came forth on the third day that had been buried in the ground.
But could I ask a question? So.
All right, since there aren't any questions, we'll move right. Oh, go ahead.
Where is it that Yah is saying we will make man in our image?
Oh, that's back here,
Genesis
126.
1.
126.
Right. Jesus.
Yeah, so that to me is like wouldn't that be a prophecy of,
Oh, boy, that's,
But 111 is before 126.
see, you always like to win, don't you?
No, I don't.
No, I'm kidding, I'm
no,
joking.
he's
I'm
ready
joking.
for you
No,
every
I'm just
Shabbat.
kidding.
He's ready for Martha.
Sure.
Right.
Who's the we?
Well, I mean, this is just pretty simple thinking, but to me, it was God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit.
At least the first two. Some will question the Holy Spirit,
But
it
the
doesn't, either way.
Ruach was, Elohim was hovering over the surface of the water.
They're all there. Oh, trust me, they're all there. I have no argument about that.
Okay,
So
so who do you think us is?
I think it's the Trinity.
The Trinity.
Well,
There are
here's-
some who would argue
Or
that the
duality.
creation account, the creator, who created everything? It's in the reading from John.
It's in the first sentence of Pharisetical.
Yeah, we didn't do that. The first sentence.
We're going to come back to the
Oh, okay.
first sentence.
Well, I have a commentary on it. Now, this is the Pharisetical
Sure.
Commentary. And it says, when Moses wrote the Torah and came to this verse, let us make, which is in the plural and implies that there is more than one creator. And he has the Hebrew in here, which I can barely read because it's so tiny. Is more than one creator. He said, sovereign of the universe, why do you thus furnish a pretext for heretics to maintain that there is a plurality of divinities? Right. W-R-I-T-E. God replied, whoever wishes to err will err. Instead, let them learn from their creator who created all. Yet when he came to create man, he took counsel with the ministering angels. And that's from the Midrash.
So the us would be the ministering angels?
But that's a
That's a rabbinic.
Rabbinic.
What
That's
is wrong?
rabbinic.
What is wrong with that commentary?
it leaves no room for the Messiah.
Is there-
Right.
What else?
Does it really say that? Or is it implied?
No, I'm saying what is wrong with the commentary? Not what is wrong. There's nothing wrong with the verse. But
Well,
That's an interpretation, not a
That's what I'm
Pharisee
trying to
interpretation.
say.
in my opinion, what's wrong with that commentary is
That's an
it says
interpretation.
their
of
interpretation.
Pharisees. Yeah.
yeah,
Their
Oh, yeah.
interpretation.
let's hear.
In my opinion, that their interpretation indicates that angels have creating ability, and they do not.
Or they co-created with, or that they co-created
They
with the
co-created.
creator.
Okay, and I dispute that vigorously.
Right, I'm just giving you
Yeah, no, I understand that. That's
their viewpoint, and then he's saying, God said, and this is something I have an issue, whoever wishes to err will err. So he's
This
saying
is
like,
what their commentary says.
yeah, so he's saying, well, just let Moses write it down wrong.
Okay.
So that to me undermines the
I think so.
That's definitely
whole
rabbinic
Bible.
thinking.
All right, I'm going to share part of the reading I was
crafty.
thinking about. This is John 1, and we'll just read the first couple of verses. The Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through him, and apart from him, nothing is made that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overpowered it. So, for sure, Yahuwah the Son is there co-creating. The case for Yahuwah the Ruach HaKodesh, it's more difficult to prove, and I won't do it here, but I believe that the entire Trinity was clearly involved in it. But it's a very easy case to make for God the Father and God the Son.
I guess I've always thought the Trinity, you can't extract one from the other. Like they are.
Which is
They're one.
why I think
Okay.
the case is there for the Trinity.
Right.
But some will fight that.
Based on what? Okay, we don't need to, that's
I
my
can't defend
ever,
other people's opinions that I don't
Right.
agree with, so I'm sorry, I'm not gonna try.
I just guess I get fascinated by how do you get to that point of view? I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay, good discussion, I appreciate it. So, back to almost in the beginning. So on the third day, that which was dead sprouted forth into life. In that rebirth, the resurrection of the dead, lies our blessed hope. And you know what happens next.
No.
Eve takes the bait.
Mhm.
Um,
How many times have we had that, that little questioning thought run through our minds about any number of different things? Like, well, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. And maybe that's not what they meant. Maybe.
Mhm.
I'm gonna flash forward. I thought I had a slide. I'm sorry, I don't. To the book of Numbers. Let me call it up on the. You can read along. Numbers chapter 20. My AV guy must have dropped this slide, and I'll share this now. Numbers chapter 20, starting in verse 6. Oops. I got the wrong reference. Okay, sorry about that. Numbers 30. Let me share the screen here. Start Numbers 30. We're going to flash forward a little bit to Numbers 30. I'm going to start in verse 2. Verse 6. Suppose she should marry, talk about oaths and vows. Suppose she should marry after her vow or a rash promise of her lips by which she obligated herself. Now, if her husband hears about it, but says nothing to her on the day he hears about it, her vows will stand and her pledges by which she has obligated herself will stand. But if her husband should hear about it, and on the day he hears it, he forbids it, he thereby nullifies her vow and her rash promise by which her lips have obligated her, and Adonai will forgive her. So, I'm not going to read it, but Genesis 3:6 lets us know that Adam was with her, Eve, when all this broke bad, and he did not intercede. He was party to the promise and actions of his beloved wife at this point because he did not forbid it. He is her covering, his kippurim, his her covering, and he failed. So that sounds good.
Could I ask another question?
Yeah, of course,
So was he her covering at that point already?
absolutely.
So, I'm sorry, I don't have.
Well, no, that's a good question. Let's go ahead. You explore yours.
Yeah, because when they sinned and they're being kicked out of the garden, one of the things that meant for Eve was that she would be, wrong word, not the word, but beholden to her husband in a way that she had not been prior. So what does that mean? Like how is it different? And I just thought, well, maybe that means that in the garden, she had a direct relationship with Yah. And then when the sin happened, that removed her a rung down, basically, to then be more reliant on her husband.
Now, I'm going to opine, and I'd have to backtrack and do some research, but I believe that covering existed from the beginning because she was made from him, taken out of him. And this, what you said, is very true. It is very clear that at that moment, she became subject, whatever you want to call it, more so to her husband's rule, if you will, than before. But I don't think it was anything new. I just think it was amplified and the line was made clear. She was basically I don't want to say, she was
She was made as a helpmate
Yes,
for a man,
Right.
not as an equal partner.
Well, maybe the reason for that, the emphasis on that after the sin was now she had over her a sinful person, right? That is going, like prior to that, him as her covering came with perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after the sin, now she is being covered by someone who is equally sinful. And what that means, I don't know. But I mean, there was obviously a shift that happened there. It was no longer, that became part of, the way I read it, a part of the curse almost. Like now she's going to be in painful childbirth, and now you're going to be beholden to your husband.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt like these are the consequences of your decision versus something else.
let me go on to the next point. And I think that's all true.
Mhm.
But I think that from her formation and when the breath of life was given into her, that Adam was given her as a helpmate. And he always had a role of protection over her, always.
Right.
What you say is all true, that it was made very clear in Scripture that she would be, and I'm not reading the verses, maybe you are, that she would be subject to her husband's rule. So, and this, a lot of folks will disagree with this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be bold, but that men and women are different. We talked about. And I believe that men in a relationship, a marital relationship especially, have a role that's different from that of a woman. And not one of a dictator by any means, but the buck stops here in our family. So.
Okay, it says, to the woman, and this is Genesis 3:16, to the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pain from conception to labor. In pain will you give birth to children. Your desire will be toward your husband, yet he must rule over you.
Okay. I think that's a clarification of something that already existed to a large degree. And it made no doubt in Adam's mind. So I want to go back to the verse that Press has already from Numbers for just a second. How long has the law or Yahuwah's instructions to mankind been around? Did it come with Moses? Was there lawlessness before Moses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there was.
Right?
Some would say that. I believe his instructions were there since the beginning.
Right.
So that Adam knew he was responsible for Eve because she came from him, and God gave him that helpmate. Anyway, I think it's been around a lot longer than people would say. So yes, Moses wrote it down and codified it, but it is no way his law. There's no way the law of Moses is his law with a capital H. So I want to point out another thing, and again, I'm not going to prove it here, just in the interest of time, but it'll be your homework. The serpent, who we know is the adversary or Hasatan, we learned that in Revelation for certain if we had any question, was not a fallen angel at this point. He was an angel, a great angel.
Well, who was the serpent?
Hasatan. He was not. Do you think that Yahuwah God would let a fallen angel into the Garden of Eden, the most holy of holy places? He would not. So he had not fallen yet. And this communication thing, Vera and I talk about this fairly regularly. It's like, you can't wait for all the animals' tongues to be loosed.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
Jubilee.
Yeah. So anyway, I said, I'm not going to prove it here. It's something for you to think about.
Yeah.
He hasn't fallen yet. Just take my word for it at this point. But then go prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Prove that he's already a fallen angel in the garden.
I guess I always just assumed that.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Well, what about his actions?
Oh, he's sinful. But
Well,
he didn't. But it's late. He has not. He's developing this seed to become like the Most High God. He hasn't executed it yet. He hasn't been thrown from heaven yet. He hasn't. And if you want me to prove it, I will, but it'll be another teaching.
To just go back to Martha's thing about the Eve, her, another way of looking at it is that men are stronger. We're physically more dependent on them.
Right.
We just, not all of us, but, depend upon the man and the woman, but I think the man is just physically stronger
Yeah.
than the woman.
Yeah. And I don't have an issue with any of that, so that's not the point of my
I understand.
question.
No, it's a good question.
It's just more of a, now this will be my second time going through Torah, second year. It's like, wait a minute. All these little things started popping up this time that didn't last time, and I guess I just was trying to think in terms of when it's in the Word, it's important, and there was a reason why that was stated the way it was, with that emphasis at that point, which was post the original sin. So did that in some way change the relationship that Eve had with Yah?
What's the usual explanation? They say, well, it's fill in the blank original sin. Who do they say was committed the original sin?
Eve. No?
Say Adam. They say Eve was deceived. Adam willfully sinned.
Because he was told, don't do this. So
Now Eve knew all that because of the conversation she has, which we read with the serpents, and know it. And she even added to it, we're not to eat or touch the fruit.
because
Listen,
Adam
out of the
told-
mouth of babes. Hank, what was Adam told?
Not to eat or touch off the tree of knowledge.
Only to eat. There was no prohibition on touching it, at least
there
not the fruit.
was. I think I read that. Didn't we read that?
That's what you told me.
We
That
were
doesn't-
reading it.
Uh-oh.
I didn't just
Here
tell
go the
you.
fingers again, just like in the garden.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll find it. We don't need
Eve
to
added
stop.
that. So
So
Eve
Adam
added
was
it.
told.
Eve added.
Eve added it.
Gotcha.
I did.
Right? So
Okay.
she knew it.
But she said don't eat or touch.
Or touch.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yahuwah told Adam, don't eat.
Gotcha.
So Adam probably said, oh yeah, by the way, don't mess with that tree over there. Probably
Okay.
because she knew, and Adam is standing right there. Now Adam was right there with Eve when she's having this conversation about this fruit, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, surely you will not die. Surely. Her name's not Shirley, so I don't know what he's even talking about. But a common discussion of that will say, well, Eve was deceived, but Adam is the one that sinned. And I think the origin of that is the fact that Adam was the one that had the covering over Eve and had the responsibility to reject that promise that she'd made, that action that she'd taken, that commitment. Said, oh, sure, I'll do that. And he didn't say nay, 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 because what it tells us is in, again, the end of Numbers 30, the passage we read, verse 8, he thereby, if the husband should hear about it and on the day he hears it forbids it, if he would have said,
No,
bad, 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 you did wrong,
we'd all still be in the Garden of Eden.
well, I doubt it. Somebody would have screwed up and bring that in now. As it turns out, we're going to find out it only took a week or so for them to screw, well, I don't know. It didn't take very long for them to screw up. So, but if he had done that and nullifying her vow and her rash promise by which her lips had obligated her, Adonai would have forgiven her. Now he forgives all those who. So I think that existed just because of many reasons. That covering existed. It was explicitly stated in the verses you read. It's my opinion.
Okay.
What do you think, Chip? You agree?
Well, there's a lot of thought.
Well, we're
Along
open
those
forum here,
lines.
so go for it.
But I have to pretty much think that Hashatan may not have been cast out of heaven at that point, but I believe he had already sinned against Elohim.
I don't argue with that.
Um,
But there is a
I
time when
do
a third of
believe
the
that-
stars are swept from heaven, and that hasn't happened yet.
and I think there's a lot to say about what happened. Earth was not created as void or formless in the beginning, and something may have happened upon this earth before man was created and placed upon it. There's a lot to be said about that, and the first rebellion of Satan, from what I understand from all the studies that I've done and everything, was he was completely against the plan of Elohim to create man in the first place. And that has always been his initial hatred and argument with man, is the fact that we were created to replace his kind.
I'll tell you what, if you'd like to present a teaching on that with your references, I'd be happy to give you time on a Wednesday evening. But there's nothing in what I read in Genesis that indicates that, or even in Jubilees. So.
Yeah, where it says tohu bohu in the first chapter of Genesis, there's a lot to be said about.
I agree. There is no shortage of interpretations.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you'd like to present
Like you
what
say,
you believe is true, I'm happy
yeah.
to give you the forum. I'm not prepared to discuss it today because I don't have the
true.
references you have, or I haven't read it.
Yeah. There's,
So let me know when
there's-
you want to do it.
Yeah,
when you're ready.
it would be a big task to do
Well-
something like that, and in a future time, if I'm able to get the right stuff.
Well, you
put
can't just
together,
throw
I'd
something
be
out there
glad
and
to
then
do-
walk away from it.
Well, I'd be glad to do a teaching on that.
Okay, then you're on. Let me know when you're
Yeah,
ready.
sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
happy to entertain it. We're always looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't know at all.
Go back to, if I can find where I was here. All right, let me share the screen again. Okay, we're in chapter Genesis 3, verse 23. Adonai Elohim sent him away from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which you've been taken. And he expelled the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he had cherubim, we might say cherubims, dwell along with a whirling sword of flame to guard the way to the tree of life. So Genesis 3 ends with these verses, out they go. So what's the deal with the whirling sword of flame? So cherubim is plural, so there are at least two.
You gonna die if you try to come through here?
Yeah, Hank, based on something I said before about what Gan, or how do you say it, Gan or Gan? Gan meant as an enclosed garden, why are the angels stationed at the east of the garden and not the north, south, and west? If it's enclosed,
So there's a river on each.
That would be a gate that goes in.
might be the only way in.
You'd think he would have guarded all entrances in if there had been others.
Right. So maybe there's only one way in, because it's an enclosed garden. Okay. Something to remember. And again, at a future day, we may get to that. There's only one way in and one way out of the garden, the enclosed garden, the fenced-in garden.
And so while being expelled from the garden was a punishment, it was also merciful, don't you think?
Yes.
Because it kept them in their simple state from eating from the tree of life.
Well, it kept them from being exterminated putting them, by paroling them instead of sending them to executing them, violating God's law. But
Well, I guess I'm trying to like put the tree of life, like the presence of the tree of life and how it was called out into, what was the context for that?
Yeah.
Was
Well, Adam and Eve were allowed to eat of that
Tree of life.
tree of life.
before they
They-
ate of the
That's right,
tree of
before.
knowledge
That's
of
right,
good
they
and
were
evil?
told that they could eat from any tree in the garden was fruit for them,
Except-
except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
But once they had eaten from that, then the
they
way I
fell-
was reading that was that the gate had to be guarded because now they needed to be kept away from the tree of life
Exactly,
because
because they became a different type of being, and they were more perfect from their original creation, but when they sinned against Elohim and committed disobedience, then they no longer qualified to be eaten of the tree of life any longer. Therefore, death would come into the world.
Right.
Okay, then every
Okay,
man
okay.
would die from that point on.
That's by sin. That's right.
That's right. It was because of the sin that brought death into the world. And from that point forward, creation was disrupted. And it would take a great sacrifice of the Messiah to restore us, to give us the ability to be restored to our original creation. So you could almost think that when Adam and Eve were first created,
Just watch.
they were made to live forever
Right.
at that
They were.
point. And they were. So when they sinned and fell and ate of that fruit of knowledge of good and evil, they didn't become Elohim, they became man who would be subject to death
Right.
from that point on.
Decaying.
That
Right,
answers
exactly.
your-
And that was reflected upon everything upon the earth too,
Right.
from what I believe. Because even from that point on, there would be death and
The second law of thermodynamics.
yeah,
Everything is in a state of entropy.
right,
Moment.
exactly. And the entire world would age also.
Does this
Okay,
answer-
there's tons of, go ahead, Vicky, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, that answers your question about the original sin, right there. Is that what you
So-
were thinking?
Yeah, I apologize that I'm not prepared to discuss all the different
Sorry.
possible questions there are in this passage. There's a ton of them, and I get that.
There's a
And I'm
lot.
glad you're all thinking about them.
Bill.
Verse 3.
I'm so sorry, Bill.
No, not at all. Don't be. They're all good questions, and I have to pick and choose that I'm gonna prepare for and do my best to find answers and encourage you to do the same. So. Anyway, sorry I brought up the whole story of the apple, or the fruit of the tree, and the whirling swords. I thought whirling swords were pretty cool, actually. All right. I'm going to move on from chapter 3. Are there any other points about the fruit of the tree? Chip, you good?
Good.
What kind of fruit was it? Don't say apple. Okay. All right. Chapter 4 covers a lot of ground, including the unfortunate incident of Cain and Abel. You know the story, I hope, and I'm going to read just one verse. Genesis 4 and verse 9. Then Adonai said to Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" "I don't know," he said. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The word translated keeper is the Hebrew word shamar. Take a look at the sense of the word and its biblical usage here. Shamar. Another sense of the word is bodyguard. You see watch over, guard, keeper. So, am I my brother's bodyguard, keeper, guard? So, in this one verse, the murderous Cain lies. I don't know. He knows exactly where Abel is. he denies impudently knowing his brother's whereabouts, and then he scornfully questions Yahuwah by saying, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So I want to ask, because we have the privilege here of having two brothers today, what does it mean to be your brother's keeper? You want to go in alphabetic order or age order?
The wheels is turning.
Doesn't matter, because his name is
First
actually
one.
Jack, right? So you'd be your first anyway. What does it mean to be your brother's keeper? What do you think?
To have to look after him all the time, like know where he is at all times,
For what reason?
like make sure he's safe.
Keep him safe? Okay. What you got?
About the same.
Baby brother?
About the same.
About the same. Okay, to watch. Do you do that?
No.
Sure. Not always.
Okay. All right, it was perfect at doing that. And brother here, this is an example here. We have two brothers in the Bible story. It's two physical, biological brothers. The word is bigger than that. It means kind of like brethren. It's like me watching, if I see a car careening out of control towards Vicky, I might go, Vicky, you might want to move. You have a question?
No.
Okay. So it's a broader, in application, it's broader than just biological brothers. What if you don't have a brother? Oh, I'm not going to do anything. I'm off the hook. So, but I just took advantage of the opportunity. We have two brothers, and we're talking about two biological brothers. So let me read from Matthew Henry's commentary on the whole Bible about this. So this is his words. Cain's plea. He pleads not guilty and adds rebellion to his sin. For one, he endeavors to cover a deliberate murder with a deliberate lie. I know not. He knew well enough what had become of Abel, and yet had the impudence to deny it. Thus in Cain, the devil was both a murderer and a liar from the beginning. See how sinners' minds are blinded and their hearts are hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. That's an important point. Your hearts are hardened and your minds are blinded by the deceitfulness of sin. Those are strangely blind that think it possible to conceal their sins from a God that sees all. So in the first part of this verse, it says, Adonai said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? Do you think that God knew where Abel was?
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Of course he did.
Do you think it was wise to mouth off to God?
No. Oh no.
Why?
Because you should respect him, and he should already know, or Cain should already know that he knows where his brother is.
Do you remember from the reading what happened to Cain as a result of his?
Then he died.
He did not.
Oh
I mean, eventually he did.
no, I don't remember.
We'll reread that. But anyway, life got tough for Cain. He had to scrounge and forage for things.
If God's perfect justice, Cain will be punished for that sin.
So that's yet to come, actually, which is
I
interesting.
think, so back in the garden, after Adam and Eve had sinned, they're hiding, and you have God who walked with them going, Yoo-hoo, where are you? Where are you? Of course he knew where they were. I think that in our lives, when our spirit hears a rhetorical question, we probably need to be like, yikes, you know what? He knows. He knows my heart. He knows what I've done. And there ain't no use in trying to hide it, because he already knows where I am and what I've done.
Yeah. So back to Matthew Henry's commentary. Those are strangely blind. See how sinners' minds are blinded and their hearts hardened by the deceitfulness of sin? Those are strangely blind that think it possible to conceal their sins from a God that sees all, and those that are strangely hard that think it desirable to conceal them from God, who pardons those only that confess. He impudently charges his judge, with folly and injustice in putting his question to him, am I my brother's keeper? He should have humbled himself and have said, am not I my brother's murderer? But he flies in the face of God himself, as if he had asked him an impertinent question to which he was no way obliged to give an answer. Am I my brother's keeper? Surely he is old enough to take care of himself, nor did I ever take any charge of him. Something he reflects on God and his providence, as if he had said, art not thou his keeper? If he be missing, on thee be the blame, and not on me, who never undertook to keep him. Note, a charitable concern for our brethren, as their keepers, is a great duty, which is strictly required of us, but is generally neglected by us. Those who are unconcerned in the affairs of their brethren, and take no care when they have opportunity to prevent their hurt in their bodies, goods, or good name, especially in their souls, do in effect speak Cain's language. That's the end of Matthew's commentary. These are good words. We are our brothers and keepers. Not only biological brothers, but brothers and sisters, whether they're believers or not. I would offer the same protection to anyone whom I met. Something about loving thy neighbor as thyself, which we read earlier. Okay, it's a good discussion. It's a great point, and you'll see it again in my final points. So we are all keepers of our brothers and sisters, especially in the body of Messiah. So how does that work in action? Are we busybodies, nosing around? What are you doing? Where have you been? Where were you last month?
I was at a football game.
No, I was rhetorical. I'm sorry. So who are you with?
Let's just answer.
Know your business.
None yet? None yet been?
None yet.
What'd you do? Why weren't you reading the Bible? So the question is, how does this being your brother's keeper look in action?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That is a good question.
What do you think? Chet? Give me an example of being your brother's keeper. And you can use your brother if you want, or a friend, or something that you have done, or perhaps should have done, looking back through the rearview mirror with 20/20 vision, says, you know what, if I had said something to, they might not have, and now they would be able to. I don't know. I'm just trying to throw some thoughts out there. How does it look at? Make something up. I don't care.
I mean, like, you give advice to somebody not to do something that can harm them.
Could harm them, or perhaps that you know they had been told by reasonably competent authority, maybe their parents or teacher or principal or coach, not to do. Okay. Does that make you a know-it-all busybody?
Yeah. You know.
And on the flip side of that, you have to be willing to receive that kind of, if someone says, Chip, hey, shouldn't be doing that.
But maybe with further study, or the question is, do we have a responsibility to do that? It's not our responsibility to make them accept it. But do you have a responsibility to say something?
Yeah, point something out.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think that is what loving someone looks like. I don't think that loving your neighbor means you just go along with everything they say. In fact, that's not loving your neighbor necessarily. So I think we do have a responsibility, as one of the two greatest commandments, to be caregivers or takers of the people around us.
And it flows so easily from the tongue. You shall love your neighbor as yourself.
And for them, for the boys, it's going to look different than for us, what being our brother's keeper is,
Right.
because
Well, I just think the older you get, it feels like the stakes get higher. You know, the decisions impact more people. And so it's part of growing up. You are faced with more challenging situations, and you know, and so it is different. It is different, but I think that's part of the growth process too.
Well, I know that having a younger brother, 2 years younger than me, that was pretty wild as a young child, used to anger a lot of people that were bigger and older than him. And they would physically come after him. And as his older brother, I stood in the breach and I prevented those little older and bigger kids from giving him probably a much deserved whipping. And in a lot of cases, that was the case. And I remember that as an older brother, I always felt a responsibility for my younger siblings.
And then did you read in the riot act for what he'd done and try to straighten him out?
Yeah, I told him. I told him.
That's part of being your brother's keeper.
But then the day came when he had to learn for himself.
Yeah.
And that was a beautiful thing because I allowed a boy that was the same age as my brother to basically whip his butt fair and square right there on the spot. And it was a lesson well learned for my younger brother.
Yeah.
And that was another way that I guarded or protected my brother, because he finally woke up a little bit after that happened. And he realized that
the consequences hurt.
That's right. And he realized that he could no longer get away with that anymore. So there you go.
Yeah, so that's two sides of the same coin of the brother's keeper.
Right, exactly.
It's not you protecting him from
Not always.
everything.
It's making sure that he gets the lesson that he needs so that doesn't happen again.
And our Holy Father,
And our Father's most forgiving of all.
and he does the same kind of things with us.
He does.
He protects us, and then sometimes he lets things happen
Right.
so that we're supposed to learn a lesson.
That's right.
Very true. Anyway, it's a good discussion about am I my brother's keeper? I think it's probably one of the most, it's a lot in the Torah portion, but this is one of the most valuable thoughts to ponder and keep in your mind. Am I my brother's keeper? And how do I put that in action? Because we know we don't just hear, but we hear and obey God's word. So the answer is yes. You're your brother, your sisters, your mothers, you're your grandparents, you're your friend Vicky's, you're your whatever it is. So a lot of application to that. So by next Saturday, if you could each give me a 5,000-word essay on what it means to be your brother's keeper. Just Chip and Hank.
Time to save
Yeah,
space.
Philip, you're off the hook.
He's just gonna.
Well, I've
I'm
lived it
just
for a
kidding.
long time.
Okay, I'm gonna move along here then. I appreciate the discussion. That's all good stuff. So chapter 5, this is all I'm going to touch on in chapter 4. But chapter 5 is the book of the genealogies of Adam. When we get to Genesis 10, believe it or not, next week, we'll compare this genealogy along with Noah's genealogy in Luke, with the genealogy in Luke chapter 3. So please review that. That'll be part of the reading. We sometimes skip past the genealogies and all the begetting and begotten, and but it's all there for a reason. As I said, there's not one extra word or even one extra letter in the Bible. And we're going to come back to the one extra letter in a minute. Believe it or not, we're making progress. We're not done, but we're closer than when we started. A little bit. Okay, chapter 6 starts with, and this is the end of the Torah portion from Genesis, starts with these 8 verses that close it out. Now, when humankind began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, and then the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were good, and they took for themselves wives, any they chose. Then Adonai said, my spirit will not remain with humankind forever, since they are flesh. So their days will be 120 years. Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, whenever the sons of God came to the daughters of men and gave birth to them. Those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And Adonai saw that the wickedness of humankind was great on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their heart was only evil all the time. So Adonai regretted that he had made humankind on the earth, and his heart was deeply pained. So Adonai said, I will wipe out humankind whom I have created from the face of the ground, from humankind to livestock, crawling things, and the flying creatures of the sky, because I regret that I made them. And then the last verse in this portion, but Noah found favor in Adonai's eyes. So there's our lifeline, phone a friend. So 6 chapters in, and Yahuwah is going to wipe out all humankind. Brother Noah and the Noah family become our lifeline. Some avoid a discussion of the Nephilim. We do not. I can prepare a separate teaching on the Nephilim for a Wednesday study if that is of interest. Let me just give you a way too short summary. Man's DNA was corrupted through breeding of fallen angels with human women. The offspring are the Nephilim. Our Yahuwah-given DNA is precious. So precious, he destroyed humankind by flood to rid the earth of the impure bloodlines. Next time, he's destroying the world by fire. I'm becoming more and more convinced that the mRNA vaccines, which I have in quotes, are at a minimum temporarily altering the DNA of the recipient. It is very likely they're permanently altering the DNA. Yahuwah is not amused, in my opinion. Hasatan is jubilant. Jubilant? How do you say that? Jubilant.
Mm-hmm.
There, I said it. Okay. I'm not suggesting a believer who takes a vaccine loses his or her salvation, so don't interpret it that way. I am saying, though, I believe taking the vaccine is not only not something, quote, Jesus would do, unquote, as Franklin Graham has stated, it is not something of which Yahuwah approves in the slightest. It's my opinion. Respect everyone's opinion and those with different opinions, and love and respect them all, but I'm not going to shy away from the controversy on this. So that's where the Nephilim came from. And we're not done with them. The flood did not eradicate the Nephilim, it eradicated humankind, save eight. So that's the first part of my teaching. Remember my 5 or 6 bullet points about the outline for the teaching. This is number 1, the story. So I want to rewind now to Genesis 1:1 for one specific point, and then we'll look at Jubilees a bit. Then I'll turn it over to Vera for Hebrew. Okay, I think this is perhaps the most beautiful thing ever written. This is the first verse of Genesis. So let that sink in. Bereshit bara Elohim, and then generally untranslated is this Aleph Tav right in the middle. Hashemayim et Haaretz. In the beginning, created Elohim, and again that pesky Aleph Tav, the heavens and the earth.
In the beginning of God's creating, Aleph Tav.
What is the Aleph Tav word in the middle? Most translations just don't translate it. Say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Well, he spoke everything into existence, so he had to have a language. And Aleph Tav is Alpha, Omega, soup to nuts, beginning, the end, the whole guacamole, or what do you say?
First.
Tamale.
The first and last, the whole tamale, the whole.
A to Z.
A to
Okay,
Z.
I think that unspoken silent word is one of the loudest words ever spoken. I've shared with Vera and others many times over the last 5 years that though I had no scriptural support for it, I believe that the first thing Yahuwah created was not something physical or visible. And we're going to cover those physical and visible creations momentarily. But it was the Hebrew language, the Aleph Tav, the A to Z, the beginning and the end. And there it is in plain sight, right in the middle of the first verse of Genesis. Boom.
Booyah.
So what if it said, this is the Bristow revised version, translation, whatever it is. In the beginning, Elohim created Aleph Tav, the heavens, and the earth. Okay. I think that's the most beautiful thing right there. Bereshit bara Elohim Hashemayim. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to move into, we're going to look at Jubilees chapter 2. If you have Jubilees, you can open it. I will read if you don't. And this is going to be really quick. And again, if you don't like Jubilees, then that's fine. I'm going to cover it at least as a historical, accurate document. As a second witness, answer some questions we have about the Genesis account. The good news is we really didn't have any questions that came up during that cover of the Genesis. So, it should be. Okay. I'm starting at in chapter 2 at verse the first. Here's a copy if anybody wants one to look at. There's one over there. Is that yours, Vicki?
Yeah, that's
I have
Vicky's.
one.
Okay, I'll read.
Do you want that?
You can have that one.
It's like page 54 or something, maybe somewhere there.
58.
58, thank you. I'm going to, in Jubilees 2, verses 1 through 3. And the angel of the presence spake to Moses according to the word of Yahuwah, saying, write the complete history of the creation, how in 6 days Yahuwah Elohim finished all his works, and all they created, and kept the Sabbath on the 7th day, and hallowed it for all the ages, and appointed it as a sign for all his works. For on the first day he created the heavens, which are above, and the earth, and the waters, and all the spirits which serve before him. The angels of the presence, and the angels of sanctification, the angels of the spirit of fire, and the angels of the spirit of the winds, and the angels of the spirit of the clouds, and of darkness, and of snow, and of hail, and of hoarfrost, and the angels of the voices, and thunder, and lightning, and angels of the spirit, of cold and heat, winter, spring, and of autumn, and of summer, and of all the spirits of his creatures which are in the heavens and on the earth. I'm going to dwell on that for a second. All the spirits of his creatures, if you look at my list, that's number 4. Every spirit of man, past, present, and future, was created on day 1. Ponder that. And all the spirits of his creatures, which are in the heavens and on the earth. And that's animals too. You think that animals have spirits? He created the abysses and the darkness, eventide and night, and the light, dawn and day, which he hath prepared in the knowledge of his heart. And thereupon he saw his works and praised him, and lauded before him an account of all his works. For 7 great works did he create on the first day: heavens, water, angels, man's spirit, abysses, darkness, and light. Okay, day 2, and I'm going to keep reading in verse 4. And on the 2nd day, he created the firmament in the midst of the waters. And the waters were divided on that day. Half of them went up above, and half of them went down below the firmament that was in the midst over the face of the whole earth. And this was the only work Elohim created on the 2nd day. Must have been a big deal. Day 3, picking up in verse 5, and on the 3rd day, he commanded the waters to pass from off the face of the whole earth into one place, and the dry land to appear. And the waters did so as he commanded them, and they retired from off the face of the earth into one place outside of this firmament, and the dry land appeared. And on that day he created for them all the seas according to their separate gathering places, and all the rivers, and the gatherings of the waters, and the mountains, and all the earth, and all the lakes, and all the dew of the earth, and the seed which is sown, and all sprouting things, and fruit-bearing trees, trees of the wood, and the garden of Eden, in Eden, and all plants after their kind. These 4 works God created on the 3rd day. And on the 4th day, he created the sun and the moon and the stars, and set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon all the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths, and for months, and for feasts, and for years, and for Sabbaths of years, and for jubilees, and for all seasons of the years. And it divideth the light from the darkness, for prosperity, that all things may prosper which shoot and grow in the earth. These 3 kinds he made on the 4th day. And on the 5th day he created great sea monsters in the depths of the waters, for these were the first things of flesh that were created by his hands. Fish and everything that moves in the waters, and everything that flies, the birds and all their kind. And the sun rose above them to prosper them, and above everything that was on the earth, everything that shoots out of the earth, and all fruit-bearing trees, and all flesh. These 3 kinds he created on the 5th day. And on the sixth day, he created all the animals of the earth and all the cattle and everything that moves on the earth. And after this, he created man, a man and a woman created he them. Remember, we talked about Eve being created as part of Adam, but not being formed as an entity unto her own just yet. He gave them dominion over all that is upon the earth and in the seas and over everything that flies and over beasts and over cattle and over everything that moves on the earth and over the whole earth. And over all these he gave him dominion. And these four kinds he created on the sixth day. All right, let me look at I'm just going to look at the following verses that kind of summarize this. And altogether there were 22 kinds. And he finished all his work on the sixth day, all that is in heaven and on the earth and in the seas and in the abysses and in the light and in the darkness and in everything. And he gave us great signs, the Sabbath day, that we should work 6 days, but keep Sabbath on the seventh day from all work. And all the angels of the presence and all the angels of sanctification, these two great classes he hath hidden us to keep the Sabbath with him in heaven and on earth. And he said unto us, behold, I will separate unto myself a people from among all the peoples, and these will keep the Sabbath day, and I will sanctify them unto myself as my people, and I will bless them. As I have sanctified the Sabbath day, and do sanctify it unto myself, even so shall I bless them, and they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim. And I have chosen the seed of Jacob from amongst all that I have seen. Is Jacob around yet?
No.
Has his spirit been created yet?
Oh, yes.
And have written him down as my firstborn son, and have sanctified him unto myself forever and ever. I will teach them the Sabbath day, that they may keep Sabbath thereon from all the work. I don't want you to miss this point. I will separate unto myself a people from among all the peoples, and these will keep the Sabbath day, and I will sanctify them unto myself as my people. I will bless them. All right, picking up verse 21. And thus he created a sign in accordance with which they should keep Sabbath, and with us on the seventh day, to eat and drink, and to bless him who created all things, as he hath blessed, and sanctified unto himself a peculiar people above all peoples, and that they should keep Sabbath together with us. Now, let me read the last verse. And he caused his commands to ascend as a sweet savor, acceptable before him all the days. Verse 21, when it says, a peculiar people above all peoples, does that mean those of us who are Sabbath keepers are better than other people? No, not really.
No.
It means that we are above in his hierarchy as a chosen people to sanctify, that he chooses to honor us because of that. Not because of what we've done, but because of what he's done. Okay, I'm going to move along quickly to a little bit of chapter 3. And then
That's
I'll be
grace.
done. Go ahead.
That's grace, by the way.
It is, absolute grace.
He
Unmerited.
chose to favor his people, his peculiar people, his treasured people.
His treasure, we are a treasure to him.
Exactly.
When did that grace happen, Jeff?
Yep.
Jeff, when did that grace happen?
From the moment you accept Messiah,
After Jesus died on the cross?
actually, no. That grace and favor has always been there for those that chose to pursue righteousness.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. First 8 verses of Jubilees chapter 3. And then I'll be done. I've left a lot on the table. Some of it we brought up in conversation, I know. So if you have questions or comments when I finish, then we'll do that. But let me just finish through this. And on the 6th, excuse me. And on the 6 days of the second week, we brought, according to the word of Elohim, unto Adam all the beasts and all the cattle and all the birds and everything that moveth in the water, according to their kind, according to their types, the beasts on the first day, the cattle on the second, the birds on the third, and all that which moveth on the earth on the fourth day, and that which moveth in the water on the fifth day. And Adam named them all by their respective names, as he called them, so was their name. Those were busy days. And on these 5 days, Adam saw all these, male and female, according to every kind that was on the earth. But he was alone and found no helpmeet for him. And Yahuwah said unto us, it is not good that the man should be alone. Let us make a helpmeet for him. And Yahuwah our Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon him, and he slept. And he took for the woman one rib from amongst his ribs, and this rib was the origin of the woman from amongst his ribs. And he built up the flesh in its stead, and built the woman. And he awaked Adam out of his sleep, and on awaking, he rose on the 6th day, and he brought her to him. And he knew her, and said unto her, this is my now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She will be called my wife, because she was taken from her husband. Therefore shall man and wife be one, and therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. In the first week was Adam created, and the rib his wife in the second week. He showed her unto him. And for this reason the commandment was given to keep in their defilement, for a male 7 days, and for a female twice 7 days. I'm not going to develop that. We'll come to it as we go through Torah. So I just wanted to read this to close the loop on just when Eve was formed from Adam, the 6th day of the second week of creation. So Adam was much older than Eve. He was a week older than Eve. Okay. I have one more slide before I go to it. Are there other questions, comments, or discussions about anything that we covered or anything that we didn't cover that was in the reading?
Well, one thing I think is very miraculous is that Adam, and I like to call her Yahuwah as her name, the way it's spelled in the Hebrew is a het or het letter, and I like to call her Yahuwah. Adam and Yahuwah were the only two humans that were actually formed by Elohim. The rest of us were all born from the egg. So they were created as man and woman. All the rest of us were born and became babies, and then, so their creation was different than any other humankind because of the way they were made, and distinctly more genetically pure than could be possibly imagined. And I think that's very distinct, that they were physically created, whereas we were born and grew to what we were. I think that's very important to know.
So I thought you were going to ask me well, I'll ask Hank. Before somebody asks me, I'll ask Hank. So, Hank, do Adam and Eve have belly buttons?
No.
What do you think, Chip? You understand where the belly button comes from? Okay.
That's right.
I don't know how far we are on this.
That's a good question.
I'm looking. I'm going to
When you
ask.
get there, you're gonna find out.
We got them. We were all born.
So here's another question. In our resurrection, eternal bodies, will we have belly buttons? Something to think about.
Don't know.
How would we know that?
Did the Messiah?
Sure, but, on this side of being there, and then we'll know.
It's a question that I can't answer with certainty. And the good news is that on the answer, my salvation hangeth not.
Exactly. Right.
But it's one of those questions that, usually
Things that make you go.
some 5-year-old or 6-year-old will come up with, and stump the chump it's kind of a Martha question. I'm surprised Martha didn't ask.
Are you saying I'm a 5 or 6 year old?
I think that's a compliment, that spiritually you
No.
approach God's word as a child.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely do. So, yes.
All right, I'll take it.
Okay, so let me go on to, that's recovery, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Let me
really
go
nice.
on to my final thoughts. And There's tons of them, and I skip so much it's embarrassing, but we'd be here for, literally, we could dwell on this portion for
Ever.
months. Okay. Rich knows to read the law, or his instructions have been around for a long time, since the beginning. Yes? Hank, you are your brother's keeper. You are your brother's keeper. You are each other's keepers. You're your mother's keeper. She's your keepers, and all the different permutations and combinations. We're in this together, and we're all we got. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's where it all comes from. Because you love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind. Okay, this is those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. This is said slightly different ways. And if you go look on the internet to see who said this, you come up with a wide variety of possibilities. And George Santayana and Winston Churchill and probably John Lennon, if you look long enough, the right thing. There's different, and said different ways. My point is, if you ignore the 8 verses of chapter 6 in Genesis that we read about the Nephilim, and a lot of pastors, a lot of churches, a lot of denominations don't even talk about it, then you're destined to repeat the errors that were made there. Specifically in that case was altering DNA, but more generally of messing with God's creation. That comes in many ways. It's just not going to end well. It's just not going to end well. Okay. That was a repeat from a couple weeks ago. Keep calm and carry on, and be strong and follow Torah. Forgot I saw that in there, sorry. Okay, I'm done. Are there any questions or comments before I close? Okay, thank you all for enduring to the end. It's a surprise. We just close this in prayer. Abba Father, thank you for this time together in fellowship and in your word. We just pray that you've given each one of us something to think about and then do to take into action. Being our brother's keeper and watching out for the welfare of others is paramount and prime in today's lesson. Lots of other things went on in the lesson, but that just sticks out to me as one that is very actionable. We have no tree of the knowledge of good and evil to decide whether to eat of the fruit from or not. But we can be our brother's keeper in love, speaking truth to them and being there to help along the way. We just thank you for the brothers and sisters that you put in each of our lives. And we pray that we're just awesome stewards of those relationships that you have given to us to nurture. Just pray that all that hear these words will be impacted by it in a way that causes them to take action. Just ask that you watch over us the rest of this wonderful Sabbath day that you've given us, and that the Lord of the Sabbath, Yahushua our Messiah, will be with us, not just today, but every day. And we thank you for this set apart time. We just lift all these things up to you in his name. Amen.
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 Good.
Hallelujah.